Welcome back to Tales from the Vale. Tonight, I want to tell you about a place lost to time, a small village nestled in a forgotten valley, and the strange, silent figure they called the Glass Saint. Our story begins in the village of Viridia, a place so remote that the world outside was more myth than memory. The people there were simple, their lives governed by the sun and the seasons. At the heart of their village stood an old, stone church, and within it, something extraordinary. It was a statue, life-sized, depicting a serene, robed figure. But this statue wasn't carved from marble or wood. It was made entirely of glass. Shimmering, translucent glass that seemed to trap the sunlight and hold it captive. No one remembered who made it, or why. The oldest villagers claimed it had always been there, a silent guardian. They called it the Glass Saint. They believed it watched over them, a beacon of purity in their quiet world. The curious thing was, the statue was flawless. Not a single chip, not a hairline crack, despite the centuries that had surely passed. It was as if time itself dared not touch it. Every Sunday, the villagers would gather. They didn't pray to the statue, not in the traditional sense. Instead, they would confess their troubles to it, whispering their fears, their sorrows, and their secrets into the silent air around its glassy form. They believed the saint absorbed their woes, lightening their hearts. And strangely, it seemed to work. After these sessions, a palpable sense of peace would settle over the congregation. One day, a young boy named Leo, full of mischief and skepticism, decided to test the legend. His mother had been ill for weeks, a persistent cough that left her weak and frail. The village healer had tried every remedy, but nothing helped. Leo, watching his mother's suffering, felt a growing anger. He didn't believe in a glass doll that supposedly healed hearts. He wanted a real miracle. One moonless night, while the village slept, Leo snuck into the church. He carried a small, heavy stone in his pocket. His heart pounded against his ribs, a drumbeat of fear and defiance. He stood before the Glass Saint, its form barely visible in the slivers of moonlight filtering through the high windows. It seemed to glow from within, radiating a calm that made his anger feel childish and loud. "If you're real," he whispered, his voice trembling, "then heal my mother. If you're just glass, then you'll break like glass." He raised the stone, his arm shaking. He squeezed his eyes shut and threw it with all his might. A sharp, clear tink echoed through the cavernous church. Not the shattering crash he expected, but a sound like a single, perfect musical note. His eyes snapped open. The stone lay on the floor. The Glass Saint stood, as always, untouched. Not a scratch, but something had changed. Leo leaned closer, his breath catching in his throat. Inside the saint's chest, where a heart would be, a tiny, dark fleck had appeared. It was small, no bigger than a grain of sand, suspended within the flawless glass. It was the first and only imperfection the statue had ever known. Shaken and ashamed, Leo fled the church. The image of that dark speck burned into his mind. The next morning, his mother woke up feeling better than she had in months. Her cough was gone. She sat up, her eyes clear, and asked for breakfast. The villagers called it a miracle. Leo knew it was something else. He knew his act of anger, his whispered despair, had been absorbed by the saint. The dark fleck was his own pain, now encased in glass. Word of the miracle spread, but Leo kept his secret locked away. He began visiting the church not with skepticism, but with a quiet reverence. He would watch as others came to confess their burdens. Old man Hemlock whispered of his loneliness after his wife passed. A young woman, Alara, spoke of her unrequited love. A farmer, Gregor, confessed his envy of his neighbor's bountiful harvest. And with each confession, Leo, watching from the shadows, noticed something incredible. Every time someone unburdened themselves, a new, tiny dark fleck would appear inside the Glass Saint. The flecks were different colors. Some were a murky gray like sorrow, others a venomous green like envy, some a fiery red like anger. Over the years, the interior of the saint began to fill. The once clear glass became clouded with a swirling galaxy of human pain. The light it trapped no longer shone as brightly. The statue, once a symbol of pure transparency, was becoming opaque, its form slowly obscured by the sorrows it had shouldered. The village, however, thrived. Sickness became rare. Arguments between neighbors faded into understanding. Viridia was a haven of peace and contentment. They praised the saint, leaving offerings of flowers and bread, unaware that their happiness was being paid for by the saint's growing darkness. Leo, now a young man, was the only one who saw the truth. He felt a growing sense of dread. The statue was almost full. What would happen when there was no more room? One harvest festival, a traveling merchant, a man named Cashin, stumbled upon Viridia. He was a cynical, worldly man who scoffed at the villagers' simple faith. He saw the glass saint not as a holy relic, but as a priceless work of art. The intricate, swirling patterns of color within it were, to his eyes, a unique and beautiful flaw. He wanted it. He offered the village council a fortune for it, enough gold to rebuild their entire village with stone houses and paved roads. The council, tempted by the promise of a world they'd only dreamed of, agreed. They had grown complacent in their peace, forgetting the source of their good fortune. Only Leo protested, his voice desperate. "You don't understand. You're selling our guardian. You're selling the vessel that holds all our pain." But they dismissed him as a fanatic. "It's just a statue, Leo," the mayor said. "The peace in this village comes from us, from our good nature." The day Cashin's men came to move the saint was a grim one. They wrapped it carefully in thick blankets and loaded it onto a large cart. As the cart rumbled away, Leo stood watching, a cold knot of fear in his stomach. The villagers celebrated their newfound wealth, planning their new lives. The very next day, a strange unease fell over Viridia. Old Man Hemlock felt his loneliness return, a crushing weight he hadn't felt in years. Alara was consumed by a bitter jealousy when she saw the man she loved with another. The farmer Gregor found himself arguing with his neighbor over a stray chicken. Old grudges, long-forgotten griefs, and buried anxieties resurfaced with a vengeance. It was as if a dam had broken, flooding the village with all the negativity the saint had absorbed for generations. The peace of Viridia shattered. Arguments erupted into fights. Laughter was replaced by accusation. The village that had been a haven became a hotbed of misery. Miles away, the cart carrying the glass saint hit a deep rut in the road. There was a terrible, grinding sound, followed by a crash that echoed through the hills. When the merchant Cashin rushed to look, he found his prize in a million pieces. But it wasn't clear glass that littered the ground. It was a million shards of dark, ugly, opaque material, like obsidian, that seemed to swallow the light. All the pain, all the sorrow, all the envy, finally released from its glass prison, had destroyed it from within. Back in Viridia, the villagers finally understood. Their peace hadn't come from within themselves. It had been a gift, a service performed by a silent, glass sentinel. They had traded their serenity for gold, and now they were bankrupt of spirit. Leo, standing in the empty, hollow church, knew they had a long road ahead. They had to learn, for the first time, how to carry their own burdens, how to forgive, how to endure, and how to find peace not by giving their pain away, but by facing it, together. The glass saint was gone, but its final lesson was the most important one of all. True strength isn't about being flawless and transparent, but about having the courage to carry our own imperfections and still find a way to let the light shine through. Thank you for joining me for another tale. Remember to carry your own burdens with grace and to help others with theirs when you can. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and join us again here at Tales from the Veil. Until next time, stay curious.